Hi. Every week after you finish with the lectures and the assigned readings, and the optional readings if you choose to do them, this little lecture is intended as sort of a wrap-up. Now, while the written lecture deals pretty specifically with the meta issues of that week, this lecture is intended to deal very specifically with the readings themselves. So the question that was posed to you is, with the James Thurber short story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is considered an iconic American classic, and Ursula K. Le Guin's Rule of Names, which is considered by many people a sort of definitive fantasy story, which one of these is fantasy and which is not, or are they both? And the short answer is that while they're both literatures of fantasy, only the Ursula K. Le Guin story falls within the criteria that were established for the fantasy genre. Now, this might appear to be kind of a semantic game. After all, what's the difference? The difference is that the James Thurber story deals with the psychological aspects of fantasy, whereas the Ursula K. Le Guin story is truly speculative fiction. Now, while we're going to be concerned with both during the course of this class, for various reasons we're going to focus on the fantasy genre. And towards the end, we'll come back to other traditions, like magic realism and surrealism, which deal with the more psychological or sociological or philosophical aspects of fantasy. Now, in the James Thurber story, what we see is a man fantasizing, and what's important here is that he is trying to escape his mundane life. His life isn't really that interesting. There's a lot going on that just isn't really all that enticing. And so he creates for himself these various fantasies. He goes off into daydreams, where what he's doing in real life, for instance, driving, triggers a fantasy about flying a plane, say. Now, in this sort of way, we see the kind of desperation of this sort of mundane person. And it's, to a certain degree, the same kind of desperation that we see in, say, the poem by T.S. Eliot, the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. The Ursula K. Le Guin story, in contrast to this, is dealing with a couple of different issues. It fits into this larger tradition of stories that she has, which come from what's called Earthsea. You may have heard of the book or even read it, The Wizard of Earthsea, and there are several follow-ups to it. And this story is intended to take place in that world. Now, Earthsea is this very large series of archipelagos, islands, and the people who live on them and the other creatures who share this universe, this world that she's created, are bound by certain traditions. There are political traditions, there are social traditions, the same that we have. But they also have, and Ursula K. Le Guin does a very good job of establishing it, certain magical traditions. This story is sort of different from a typical fantasy story. And now that you've read it, I can say this without spoiling it. The dragon wins. The premise of the story is kind of very, very clever. The idea that of a mistaken identity, and someone being sort of very, very foolish in jumping to assumptions, and this leading not only to their death, but some unfortunate events for those around them. Later on in the class, we're going to see how the sort of fantasy genre has certain traditions. And as we look at these traditions, we'll be able to locate specific stories within these traditions and see how one story relates to another or may comment on another. So, please finish the assignments for this week, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.